invited you all here today to be part of this this celebration, this kickoff meeting for an exciting planning project we have to figure out like what our vision is for being able to add a little bit more density in the downtown area. This is something I hear about a lot, and so you'll have an opportunity to see some planning tools for making that happen. I want to introduce Jessica and Brian Wright from Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. Some of you may recognize Brian, at least, from the Downtown Master Plan. A lot of you participated in that process, and that's been such a great document. I've been used in a lot of college classes. It's been picked up by developers and brought to me full of sticky notes and flags and highlights, and so it's just a really beloved document. Brian did a great job. He's here so we have a little bit of continuity as we think about a new place in downtown. So, yeah, without further ado, you can tell them where you're from if you want to.
Sure. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. I'm Brian. And I'm going to run through a quick presentation, have a little bit of discussion at the end. Can we hit the lights? So, yeah, Jen said Brian did a great job with downtown plan, but there's a team of people. I just get to be the one who gets to stand up in front and talk to you all. So, but yeah, so we've got a bunch of people, but most importantly, Jessica, who's here, is the project manager, and will be making sure everything kind of moves forward and gets done when I sit down and quit talking each time. So for us, we always start a project and a process. We think about building on a firm foundation. We get to work all over the country on all types of projects, and for towns and cities and everything in between. And some of them really need our help to become something, because they're not much of anything at that moment. And when we get to come to a place like this, we take more of like, how do we keep from messing things up? Because it's so amazing. The first time I came here was probably 20 years ago on vacation. My wife and I came, and wow, this is such a beautiful place. And so we start by kind of looking backwards and kind of what came before as well. And then, some the recent past with the downtown plan. If you haven't read it, it's a great read. The weekend's coming, you can do that cover to cover. But within it are a lot of ideas that we got from the community, because we had a public process that we went through with that. And so we've been kind of looking at it, and some of the guiding principles that you'll see in there talk about inclusivity and gathering places for all, housing choices, economic vitality, cultural vibrancy, transportation choice, and sustainability and resiliency. And each of these kind of flows throughout the document and they're expounded upon. And so particularly in the downtown master plan, there are a few areas that we're going to be looking at with this latest project. And so we were kind of looking at what the downtown plan said about that, and sort of as a jumping off point. With Marble Works, for instance, is in that area, and this is some of the stuff we were thinking about in Marble Works. But for us, this project is specifically about TOD, or transit-oriented development. So if you're not familiar with this, really fun term, Todd, it's an approach to urban development, and the idea is when you have the luxury of a transit facility like you all do. The idea of centering development and growth around that, because it does a few different things. One is it's a natural gathering place and has always been when people come together around transit. But also when you have wonderful neighborhood and downtown streets that are more focused on pedestrians and that are wonderful to walk along and whatnot, they sometimes get a bit congested with all the automobile traffic. And so really focusing development around transit starts to help people not have cars or not be so dependent on the car for everything. And so you'll have people coming in and going on transit. And if we can have them living there at the station, if they're going to work elsewhere or whatever, then at a certain point it doesn't make sense for them to drive. And luckily, because your transit is focused on where it has always been, it's near the downtown area, which is great. So it's a good way to also bring some vitality to the downtown as you look to make sure you're supporting the local businesses and shops and restaurants and all of those things that are, you know, sometimes challenged by just sort of the way that people shop today online and all. You all are lucky because it's so charming that, you know, you think, why would I possibly go online for this or that if I could go downtown for that, you know? So at least I do. And you know, the place that I live it's called Franklin, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville, and it was founded in 1799. So it's you know, kind of a new kid on the block compared to you guys probably, but we're older than Nashville, so we say. We have this wonderful downtown, this very vibrant main street that, you know, is featured in, you know, Southern Living magazine every other month, and people coming and they want to visit and stay there and all. So it's great. And there are many times when I choose to go down Main Street on purpose, just on the way home, when I could have gone a different way that was faster, just because it feels so good. Or if I'm going to go to shop, you know, we have like an outdoor store, like sporting goods or whatever, and it's like, oh, we have one of the few malls in the country that's still thriving is actually in Franklin also. And I could go there, and there are probably 3 or 4 different places where I could have gotten this jacket, you know. But I'd rather go to Binks on Main Street just because of the experience. Because after I go to Binks, and I can go walk down the street and go eat at, you know, the restaurant there, and then I can go, you know, watch a show at the Franklin Theater and, you know, all that. So it's this whole experiential quality that so many places are striving for and trying to create. You guys have it in spades here. And so how do we, you know, through development and growth over time, really leverage and take advantage of that, whereas, you know, a lot of times you would see growth and development as a negative because it's like more cars, more people, more, you know, all that stuff. And assuming that you are not going to keep growth from happening at all, then, you know, how do we make it go where we want it to go, where it has the least impacts on the community and the most benefit? And so that's kind of what the whole TOD is really focusing on. And so if, you know, you want to learn more about TOD, just kind of go Google that tonight and you know, spend some time looking at it. It's all kinds of fun. But this is the boundary, the study boundary here, with no street names on it. So I'm going to have some help. Here's the star is the platform. I've got that. And then this is Seymour.
Yep.
Yes. Sometimes lower Seymour.
Just Seymour.
Okay, just Seymour. Okay.
Just Seymour.
And then this is sort of an industrial area here.
Exchange.
Thank you. Here is the beautiful. How do you refer to it? The triangle? It's not a square. You know, it's like Triangle Park. Great. I always want to say the town square, but it's not a square. You know, so yeah, so it's a pretty good sized area. We have obviously the creek. Yeah, Creek. Yeah, Otter Creek. Creeks in the south are much smaller. That's more of a river. You know, like, we have the Cumberland River that flows through and all around Franklin. It's great, but it's like it's not even that wide. It's a river. So maybe it should be Otter River. People will come see it more. And then we've got some town facilities here. We went over there. If you've ever been down that road, that's some of the waste treatment facility over there. Anybody ever been to Venice? Anybody been to Venice before? Venice, Italy? Yeah, so sometimes when you're in Venice, there's like a certain smell. Like, you know, we all say, Venice, you know. And, this has a smell too, but not like Venice. No one's going to visit there. So we learned that, and we were actually being so site specific. We were like, how far do we have to move from the emanation of this smell to not smell it anymore? What's the smell radius on this thing? So, but there's, you know, it's a big piece of property, great property over there, and it's next to the creek, and so we're kind of looking at that. There's, you know, lots of pretty large parcels over here. Here's Marble Works here. And so, you know, when you have this amazing facility, this rail platform, and you have a lot of land around it, you go like, wow, this could really be like a serious transit-oriented development. It's very unusual to be in a town this size, to have rail, not just bus service that sort of goes to some places that aren't that useful, and the land next to it to do something. So, and the proximity to, you know, this amazing world-class place in your downtown core. Zoning, currently you have a couple of different districts that our boundary falls within, the VRC, or Village Residential / Commercial District, as well as the HDR, the High Density Residential District. And so we're looking at what is allowed in those zoning districts currently, as we think about the future, and you know, they probably weren't written with transit urban development in mind. And so how do we do some things that are more specific to that? You also have a state designated neighborhood development area. And so it has some benefits to people doing development in this area, you know, time-wise, permitting costs and other things. And so how do we make sure that, you know, as we create a vision for the future together, that those who might implement that vision are aware of these things and can most easily capitalize on them to make that happen. So you have your bus. This is, you know, most places this is the extent of what we had, and so we've been looking at the bus routes and things. So that's great. And so you don't just you know, kind of get off the train and, well, I'm here. You know, how far do I really want to walk? You know, so you can get on the bus and go some places. That's great. And you have all sorts of different types of you know, bus options. Like the dial-a-ride. That's pretty awesome. It means Uber. And then this, amazing, that, you know, the train station. Do you refer to it as a station or just a platform?
Station.
Okay, good. You should. That's right. It makes it sound more impressive, right? The station. And so that's, you know, it's so great, and I think it's, you know, something that's going to just set you guys apart, right? So looking at housing options, you know, in the plan, in the downtown plan, people were saying, hey, we have a shortage of housing, and you know, different types of housing are needed, and so we've been, you know, just kind of looking at, you know, and these are just some random images, right? These aren't from here, and in fact, this is actually in my neighborhood in Franklin. So, you know, imagine architecturally calibrated, you know, to this region, things that are appropriate. But well, one of the things we want to talk about through this process is the scale of development. What's appropriate? You know, a lot of times, I mean, we were doing a transit urban development plan and zoning in Port Chester, New York, and it made sense there because it's like you get on the train and you're in Manhattan in like 20, 30 minutes. There it made sense to do like 20 stories, right? We were working on another transit urban development project in Indiana, and one of the stops was in a state park. There was development and housing wasn't appropriate there. It was like, you know, the ranger station and the bathrooms and the whatever, you know. And so kind of dialing up or down, you know, depending. Some places we go though, you say, well, for us, the most important thing is the character. We want to preserve the character of the community in this area. We love that so much. That's our first priority. But in other places, they say that is super important to us, but actually it's more important to us to solve the housing problem, or at least make the biggest impact in it that we can. So we're actually willing to go a little bit more dense than would be sort of normally thought about in a place like this, in order to be meaningfully working on that issue. Sometimes people will say that at the beginning, and then you start to look at what that looks like, and you're like, oh wait, never mind, the character first. You know, so anyway, so housing, but making sure, you know, there's options, different housing, you know, building types, housing styles, you know, helps to make the place more authentic. Because a lot of times you'll see in a transit urban development, it clearly feels like a development, right? And nothing about Middlebury feels like a development, right? It just happened organically over time, or at least it looks like it, feels like it, and so that's really nice. And you know, today, so often when people build at a larger scale, just the way we build and the way we design, things tend to come across as like, oh, that was built all at one time by one developer, you know. And so having a mix of housing types will, you know, starts to help things feel a bit more organic, and so we can talk about that, you know, throughout this project. Walkability, right? So, you know, once you get there, you can get off the train or getting to the station, you want to make sure that it's just a great experience. Like, as we were driving from Burlington, we flew in this morning, and as we were driving, you know, down the beautiful country roads to get here, I said, you know, this is really one of those places that we use this little slogan. One of our transportation engineers said it, and I just picked it up and ran with it. The journey is as enjoyable as the destination, right? And so that is definitely, you know, Burlington's great. We left Burlington heading here. It was still great. We get here. So the destination on each end are amazing, but that journey was also amazing in its own way. And so you want to think about sort of walkability and the streetscape and the placemaking in the same way. And so, you know, the station isn't right in the downtown area. And it's like getting to and from there and kind of around it, and other places you might walk. And in whatever development occurs or comes from this, it will have streets and things as well in it. And so they need to be wonderful and lovely. And so you look at some of your favorite streets around town, and you're like, oh, I love that street. Why do we love it? You know, what about it do we like? Well, it just feels something good about it. It's intimate. It feels a bit cozy and safe. Okay, well, let's measure that. Oh, the lanes that you drive in are actually narrower than the lanes out by the, you know, commercial strip highway or whatever, right? So there are things about their street trees, or there's on-street parking, and the sidewalks are a certain width, and so taking all of those things into consideration, and like this, you know, street furnishings and things as well. So rather than just sort of being generic about, you know, new streets going in, they also have their own character and don't even necessarily have a one-size-fits-all approach to them. So there may be a street that goes through that needs to carry more traffic than another street, and so it has a little bit of a different character. Or a street right in the core of a transit-oriented development might have more commercial uses on it or more mixed use, and so instead of having like a planting strip with street trees, it might have a tree grate with street trees, and the sidewalk sort of goes all the way from building to the street. So thinking about that level of detail is important. And then the idea of having a mix of uses. Now, this is one of those things that when you have an amazing, you know, downtown, sort of picturesque village that you have, I always want to be very careful in how we're thinking about if you have a mix of uses, or which you tend to do in a transit-oriented development, just because you're at the train, you're waiting, you're like, oh, I'll grab some coffee or whatever, but you don't want to do something that's competing or sort of leaching and sucking energy out of your historic core, right? It's already, you know, works so hard to be successful and thrive as it is. And so how do you do things that are complementary or, you know, whatever? So you have to be thoughtful about it. But in the case of transit development, making sure that you just allow for the flexibility to have a mix of uses and mix with housing and other things as well. So through this process, we are going to be actually drawing some plans. Step on that cord, it makes that noise. Oh, I won't step this way. We're going to be drawing some plans in that study area that I just showed you. The plans we draw are for inspiration, right? They're to say, here's what you can do. They're for you to have something to respond to, instead of me saying, so what do you think if we made a walkable mixed-use place that's about this many stories and whatever, and you're like, every single one of you has a different idea in your mind of what I'm saying, right? And so if we draw some things, and what we'll draw will be one of an infinite number of possibilities and things you could have drawn, but it will embody these principles of placemaking and good design and all of that. And then we'll also have rendering that goes along with it, and so you can go like, oh, that feels really good, that feels exactly like what we're imagining here, or that feels a bit much, and I know we said we wanted to work on the housing, but again, that's a bit tall, so maybe, you know. So here's kind of, in the past, what we did in the downtown plan. If you haven't seen this, is Bakery Lane right behind us here, big parking lot area, and looking at, you know, how this could be developed, and sort of, you know, here was like, wow, the river is here, the creek it's amazing. How do we really feature that and have greenway and park space and, you know, do some placemaking here and kind of, you know, screen it from the traffic above that's going by, and, you know, have structured parking, and then still, you know, kind of hide the parking behind development, and looking at, you know, at that point we're talking about expanding the library and stuff, and so how could that work? And so all these things that we heard about, we started to show in, you know, a sketch like this, and then we're like, okay, you know, what's this like? And then we did a drawing, you know, so it's like, okay, that's cool. You know, we understand, and this kind of feels like Middlebury, and I can imagine maybe these buildings have been here for a long time, but, you know, we pushed these buildings closer together than these buildings because if you see between them, that's where the parking garage is, right? So we wanted to hide the parking more, and so we're illustrating the idea of how you could do sort of the river walk and make these civic spaces, and, you know, here we're talking about sustainability and things, so we're showing, like, you know, rain barrels and cisterns and you know, sort of bioswales and things as part of that. So this is the kind of thing that we'll be doing through this process. So if any of you own the land in the study area, don't worry. You know, we aren't committing you to anything. You're just getting free planning. And so in addition to the planning, we'll also be working on some regulations, because we can draw pretty pictures all day long, but if the zoning doesn't support the vision that we all come up with together, then we haven't accomplished anything. Whoever wants to go try to implement the vision now is swimming upstream and has to go ask for, you know, a zoning change or ask for variances or whatever. And so we'll be working on regulations that are really focused on the character of the place, and specific to the transit-oriented development area. So there'll be sort of an overview of general provisions, and, you know, it's very sort of graphical, which makes it easier to use and understand. It'll have building and lot standards in there, so it's, you know, if you think about it as a community, as its own little sort of pocket neighborhood, if you will, you know, there'll be lots and carved out, and there'll be setbacks and things on that, and so that'll show up in standards like this. Then we'll have different frontage types. So in a commercial area, you'd have, you know, shop fronts, and maybe if we have, you know, townhouses or duplexes or whatever, we have stoops, as opposed to, you know, in the south we might have more porches or something, you know. And then we'll have uses in there, and then we're going to focus on character. We'll still have a use table, because most people are used to thinking about uses. And normal zoning really separates things by use. We find that, and if you just look around in any historic place, they didn't really care so much about uses. In fact, they didn't have zoning, so they didn't have to separate it. They just used common sense. And then any of these buildings here have been an innumerable different things over their lifespan. And so, you know, maybe at one point it started off as the livery stable, and then the next time it's now the general store, and now it becomes an apartment, and now, you know, just changes. And so having the spaces built for that, obviously there are some things that you may want to be specific about. Well, we don't want this, you know, industrial use happening in this space. That but you might not want to say specifically you can't have any industrial, because maybe you want to have some cool maker space in there, and people are like, oh, there's a leather worker or somebody who's doing like a, you know, bakery, but more than just a few buns here and there, you know, and so it's maybe a little bit bigger. So, you know, we can think about that together. What do you all want to see in there? We're working on a project right now. It's really cool. It's this agri-hood, where it's like agriculture mixed with neighborhood, and so we've got sort of fields and agriculture sort of woven amongst villages and hamlets. It's about 200 acres, so it's a pretty good-sized development. But we were going to, in one of the old farm buildings, we're kind of repurposing all the farm buildings, and we were approached by somebody who wanted to do a distillery, and they're like, oh, that's great, and we're going to actually, you know, grow the, you know, I think they were actually wanting to make brandy, and so they were going to grow the fruit on the site and all that, and so, you know, literally everything coming from the site and distilled right there. And so when we described it the first time around to the city, they're like, oh, that's an industrial use, that's not permitted. And we're like, whoa, hold on a second. Actually, what we meant to say was, and we kind of explained it in a different way, and they're like, oh, so it's an agricultural use that, you know, and it's, you know, so there are a few little things we had to tweak and adjust, because everybody wanted it. It's not the city didn't want it, but the zoning at that time didn't permit it in the way that was easy to do it. So we tweaked that. So we'll have some of that kind of stuff as we go through uses. And then civic space standards. So rather than just saying, hey, we want to have, X% of the land left in, parks or civic or just open space, a lot of times zoning will say, we talk about civic spaces, and we have specific types. So we'll have, parks and squares and plazas and pocket parks, and so we define those things, and they have standards that go along with them. So it's much more intentional. So you don't just kind of get the leftovers that they couldn't do anything with. It's like these prominent, sort of, in many cases, the most important areas are, the civic spaces. And if you think about a lot of places where you've gotten on a train, like a historic one, they'll have, sort of a plaza or some big civic space where people can gather, and that's where the kind of intensity focuses around that. So we'll have standards around that. Thoroughfare standards, where talking about getting into the different street types and all that. Parking standards, because even though we imagine that everyone's just going to ride the train to and fro, and they're going to get on the bus and come to the train, or going to walk or ride their bike to the train, some people will park too, and so we'll need to accommodate for that. But it's easy to do when you're thinking about it ahead of time, and when you have as much land as is in this boundary area. It's really cool to do. But when we were working on the downtown and waterfront plan in Burlington years ago, we were the ones who came up with the crazy idea for redeveloping the mall, which is here now it's turned into quite a saga if you've been following that. I was so excited to see it, and I was like, oh wow, it's still a construction site. It's they've done something. That's good. But anyway, when we were doing that, for the longest time, the waterfront was just industrial, and they sort of were reclaiming it bit by bit, and so we're like, okay, great. We're going to have development along the water. It shouldn't just be these sort of private townhouses. It should be some really cool, it incorporates places for everybody, and in a sort of greenway and all that. And I was like, but over here near the station, you could actually do a parking structure, and kind of incorporate it, hide it behind the buildings, like I was talking about on Great Green Lane. And they're like, whoa, didn't you hear us? We don't want to encourage people to drive. A parking garage says, please drive here. So let's not do that. Like, they were super committed to that. Whereas other places we work, the first thing they say is, well, how are we going to park? And all the people that come. So we'll kind of think through that together as to what's, what your preferences are, but what's realistic, like what's really going to get you where you want to be. And then but we'll have standards to go along with that. So in conclusion, kind of wrapping it up, I want a TOD plan that works for everybody, so it works for locals. And this is my generic local picture, because who else besides locals just takes over the sidewalk in front of their house? That's not here, but it could be, You all seem to like each other. And I love that picture. And it works for families, works for students, right? We want to get the students coming and going, and young professionals, retirees, and tourists. Again, luckily y'all are a place where people want to come visit. And I'm sure you probably have plenty of times you're like, tourists, On the other hand, it's like, thank goodness for the tourists, because we don't all go to the shops and the restaurants as much as we should to keep them in business downtown, And but it needs to be uniquely Middlebury, right? Luckily, we've worked here before, so we have a pretty good sense of what you guys are into and what this place is about. Some places we work, we've not been there before, and so we really count on the community to kind of help us and be our teammates in that. We still will help, still will count on you all to help us with this as well. So, project schedule, September, that was before, so we kind of kicked things off, and we've been doing our homework a little bit and kind of preparing. Here we are, we're doing some interviews while we're here with select board members, and kind of a site tour. We roamed around today, and so far no ticks, thankfully, but give me a couple days for them to grow a little bit. Maybe I'll have some, but I was thinking that it was cold enough that I didn't have to worry about it, so I was like, why am I all standing up there? I'm just tromping through the woods trying to get down to the water. But and then here with this presentation tonight, we're going to be working on the illustrative master plan, and then that'll come out around November. And then October, I think that's supposed to say
No, that's November, and then it's October to December.
Okay, thank you. Why am I presenting this slide? You're the one who knows this, right? I'm like, you don't want me talking about the schedule. So anyway, so we'll be drafting the regulations after that, and then we will present the regulations to staff, CCRPC and the HCRPC, and then we'll have a second trip in February to talk to the Planning Commission and to you all, show you kind of what we've come up with, and then you guys will take it from there and run with it and do with it what you want. And so, hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations, anything that I said that's concerning or exciting, or, you know, have you been dreaming about TOD for all these years and you're finally getting one, and or if you're still like, what did he say a TOD was? So let's chat.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About train schedule.
I have no idea.
I do.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I see Amtrak come through
Yes.
from Burlington to Middlebury, and it gets here about 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And it's on its way to New York City.
Yes.
Then it comes back from New York City, lands in Middlebury
Yeah.
at about 9
Uh-huh.
in the evening. And then, you know, you have freight trains that come here and there and what have you in the meantime.
Right.
If this train station is going to be kind of a hub and a center aspect of the plan,
Yeah.
are we going to be able to have more like a local train running between, say, Burlington and Rutland that would be able to run a couple or 3 times during the course of the day?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that sounds ideal. I definitely know that is beyond our scope, but it's something that, you know, to take into consideration and think about, like, well, how could that happen? You know, talking with the, you know, transit authorities or whoever is in charge of the trains, you know, because yes, if you just get a couple of trains a day and they're just going here to there, but you aren't really kind of utilizing the line the whole way, it's, you know.
And this sounds like it's a project that wants to take advantage of the fact that we've got a train station in Middlebury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, it can only be utilized once in one direction during the day and once in the other direction later on in the day.
Well,
Yes.
in terms of passenger.
Right, in terms of
Right,
passenger. And that's what
right.
we're up to.
Well, and one of the things that's kind of nice is when you start seeing proactive development around transit, all of a sudden the providers are going like, oh, look at that. Like, our ridership has gone way up now all of a sudden. It makes sense for us to ... add this or add that. And, you know, one of the things I didn't say at the beginning of this was, you know, Middlebury is just one of many places that got a grant, you know, from CCRPC that, you know, for TOD specific thinking. And so hopefully for long-term vision, I think having a more robust kind of local system would be amazing. So we'll put that down on the hopes and dreams side of the list. Yes.
One of the things that comes up for me, we live right near the train station.
Okay.
We're right on the corner of Marble Works. I saw you at the corner
Oh, cool.
looking behind Gary's property
Yes.
today.
Yes, we got a great tour. That's why I was hoping to get ticks. Yes.
Yeah, I should have brought you some deep, but what I'm thinking about is one in that area, and we call it the works. We're all kind of part of it.
The works.
We fall into the works,
Okay.
even though we're residential. In the planning, we don't have any escape plan out of where we are. We can't get across the railroad tracks, and we help a number of people, not on a daily basis, but quite a bit on, how do I get over there?
Yeah.
People get off at the train station at night in the dark. Students, I get concerned. They're walking in pitch black down to the works, up to town.
Yeah.
Now, being students, they know how to get there.
Right.
But other people coming to visit are kind of trailing along on
Yeah.
Marble Works in the dark
Yeah.
on a night that maybe the pizza place is really hopping and people are coming out that may have been partying.
Yes.
And the sidewalk has been an ongoing issue there. People drive quite fast there. And I guess my concern is if that becomes developed, which I'm all in favor of that. The road around it, it feels like the project is going to have to spread out to accommodate, like, we've got some really big hairpin corners.
Yes.
And you take your life in your hands, no matter where you are.
If you're walking.
Yeah, and with cyclists or
Yes.
skateboarders or, you know, it's, crosswalks are kind of an optional thing here for stopping.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about for my property, for my getting in and out of my driving space, and it seems like that roadway in and out on Middle Seymour when it turns into Maple is going to have to be tweaked or totally
Yeah.
incorporated into the development project of the lots that are near it.
Yes, we definitely noticed your zigzag.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I call it your traffic calming.
Yeah,
It's
and
like-
people get trapped. I mean, we
Yeah.
had a trailer truck. I don't know what he thought. I don't know his GPS, but he came very close to my house because he was going to go down the old Seymour Street in front of my house.
Yes. Yeah.
And I
We
thought,
just come off a Amtrak Rail.
Yeah.
I don't know. He stopped pretty abruptly, thank God. He
Yeah.
didn't hit the house or my tenant, but he had a heck of a time getting out.
Yeah, yeah, and what we've been doing is looking at too, because, you know, to your point, the infrastructure there is limited, ways in and out. And so we've already begun looking at where are other ways that we could connect in, and, you know, if you look
And when
to
you're
the
saying
north.
in,
and-
you mean to Seymour Street on the other side of the tracks?
Yeah, hang on, just
I-
here. Let's see.
There used to be a way to cross right there where I call it the cow shed, because that's what it looks like to me, but
Yeah, so
The
for
station.
instance, right now, I think there's these apartments or condos or something there, and the road is kind of dead ends there.
so where
no.
you need to come,
Where,
No, I'm just explaining kind of the big picture first,
Okay.
and then getting
Okay.
down, right?
okay.
So what we're looking right now, you know, here's your hairpin, right? That's
Right.
that, and it just kind of goes into Marlborough, and there's a little connection there, right, into
that's a
Well,
way,
you can come
that's a
in,
way in.
one way.
but you can't
Right,
go out
right.
that way.
And so what we're trying to do is you know, I mean, assuming that this stuff happens within here, you know, this area, we're just looking at all the different connection access points so that a street network would be available. So it's not just sort of one, you know, it's all coming in right where it does
It's not
now.
all gonna fall in the marble.
Yes, no, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean that would be a nightmare, I think.
But crossing the tracks would be a logistical.
Exactly. So we've got, and that's why we're looking, because there's already other crossings. That's why I immediately started like, oh, okay, kind of up there to the north. So, yes, you, and then over to you, and then so I have a
So I also want to talk about the train schedule,
Yes.
as well as the fact that we had the flooding with the underpass, and we haven't mentioned anything about having an accommodation for emergency vehicles to come into the street.
Yes.
I don't know if you know about that.
I saw the impassable wind
Yeah, yeah.
raining or whatever it said, and I keep thinking impossible.
Yeah,
Yes.
so we were hoping that really the railways would be involved, not just you guys. If there aren't local trains, and the only place you can go is New York City, then you're really not helping with the car traffic. You have to have that local train. So then it seems like they should be on board right away, when you have that extra district, it makes sense to me. Right now, so I'm not seeing much street, and I know when the train goes by, I can feel it, and you know, there's some shake and everything.
Yeah.
So how many trains they really want without going by is a very serious question.
Mm.
And if there aren't a lot of trains going by, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah.
So that's-
Yeah. Yeah. So those are all good questions. What's the point of doing it? I think maybe at a baseline would be because you have a housing shortage, and it's a good, you know, if you're going to do it, I can't remember if I said it or not, I said it earlier when we were walking around, but if you're going to do it, by having your development clustered in one area, it takes the pressure off for people eyeballing stuff. building that's looking a little long in the tooth in your historic core. I think we'll just knock that down and do something there. And so all of a sudden, you're sort of capturing the demand intentionally in an area that has, you know, low impact on, you know, the parts of the city, the town that you love the most. And as far as the rail company, they're notoriously difficult, not just these, around the country, all of them, because they have no incentive, right? They've got to do what we want to do, and, you know, good luck getting a crossing or whatever. So I'm sure there's some engineering solution for your swimming pool problem that you have under the bridge. I don't, you know, we're just so early on, I don't know yet what the solution is, but as far as getting additional crossings and things, I'm not optimistic about that. And so we would start by looking at where we already can cross and sort of utilizing that, making sure that any new infrastructure that goes in works and ties in those ways very thoughtfully. So I think that's what I got. Hold on one second. So you, yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Dave Longshot. I actually live on Seymour Street, just up the road from Waterworks. And I guess I have a few things to say. First of all, Tri-Valley Transit is an amazing bus service here. It's beyond what we ever think of town.
That's awesome.
Second of all, I'm psyched, regardless of train station locations and everything else, to have hundreds of new people living in the downtown. Whether the train comes 0 times a day or not, all those people are now up in the monuments and the street and shop and what they're doing, and that's great. So this is good in that respect. And third of all, it's a little changing topic, but you talked about a lot of back and forth on this project, like sharing scenarios and talking about the vibe and all that, but then your timeline only showed this presentation and the final of the presentation. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little more about what that looks like?
Yeah, so I will confess that our preference is more backing and forthing, right? That we're known for our process. Like if any of you participated in the downtown plan, we had our Planapalooza and all that stuff, and all. This project is wonderfully funded by a grant, but the grant was nominal, and so we had to kind of work together with the town and with the CCRPC and others to craft a scope that could accomplish the goals, you know, to have a vision and all of that within the budget that they had available. There has been discussions about then, you know, potentially having additional funds because some towns end up not moving forward, I think, but I'm not sure. We would love nothing more than more backing and forthing. And so we're trying to think through that, but that's the reason why it's not as much of that as we'd like. So
Is there a timeline on the grant money?
how long do you have for you to spend the grant?
I mean, a certain thing has to be done by a certain time.
Oh yeah, it's according to that timeline that
Okay.
yes, that's how it all fits in there.
There was planning done in the spring, and then the regulations had to be done, I think, by end of summer, fall, January. I'm not here, but I think that was according to the grant. So, but don't quote me on that either. But we
You're
checked
only,
it.
you're only one of 5 phases in this grant. There's a market study happening with a different consultant. There's a ridership study happening with another consultant. So don't forget, you're only phase 3.
That's right. Thank you.
So I know the number I'm thinking of in my head, but it may be for all 5 phases. It could be that your phase needs to wrap up soon.
Yeah.
But we know we have, until middle of next year.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's not a chance of time running out and then having to reapply for the grant.
No, we won't let that happen on our end. We'll make sure you guys, have it all done because we won't want that money to go to waste. So, I think you had a question, and then go to you, and then over to you.
Is there any discussion of making another bridge over the creek? From, say, the police station, Lucius Shaw Lane, and the police station complex,
another way over connecting to the bridge. It's another way out.
Yeah. You're the first person that's mentioned that, so that's very interesting. It certainly would be a pressure relief valve, and yeah.
Because when Seymour flooded, you couldn't get to the Mill Street Bridge
Mm-hmm.
to cross
Right.
the arbor.
Yeah. Yeah. We had.
Right.
Yes,
How
sir.
about moving the Pulp Mill Bridge
Why?
and putting a regular
Yeah.
bridge in place of the Pulp Mill Bridge?
You said moving the Pulp Mill Bridge and putting.
God forbid that we move that historic bridge, but utilize it somewhere else.
We tried that,
Deliver next time.
we tried that about 12 years ago,
Yes.
but that was when Jim Jeffords was still in office, and he pushed through a conservation funding grant on that, which kind of sealed the Pulp Mill Bridge there, because Bill Finger and I were trying to do just what you said.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so you would have emergency access.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, we'll plead naivete on that, and we'll put on our list of things to look into. So, yes,
Move that.
yeah, yes, in the back.
So I'm Elise Chandacker, I'm executive director of Madison Housing Works, we're an affordable housing development provider. And I'm thinking about the slide that you showed of the last phase of the master plan of the downtown municipal parking lot. And that, I feel like looks pretty differently, whether those are like condos and townhomes for affluent homeowners versus like affordable flats for people who live in around the north downtown. And so I'm just wondering how you're thinking about affordability in the regulations and how to promote mixed income.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something that's always a struggle, as you well know. And so, I remember we were working in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and obviously super expensive place to be, and very affluent people have third and fourth and fifth homes there, and retire from Microsoft, and they were in the office with Bill Gates, and yes, exactly. Yes, and so it was very expensive, and people kept talking about affordability, and we're like, well, what do we do? And we said, well, the one thing that we can do with the zoning is get rid of this minimum unit size that they had in there that was like big. And so we, maybe removed it, or maybe we just lowered it a lot. And so we were like, okay, well, everybody's like, okay, sure, like we're going to get affordable housing here. The very first thing that went in after the zoning ordinance were micro apartments that were, intended for affordable housing, and no one expected that, and so the zoning freed that up, which is amazing, and so we thought, well, if it can work there, it can work anywhere, right? From our perspective, when it comes to just the planning and the zoning, what we want to do is make sure that there are no impediments to it. A lot of places we work around the country, you can't have any inclusionary, so you can't require it at all. I know you can in Vermont, though, right? And so if that's something that you guys want to do or whatever, we can look into that, and it's a simple addition. The hard parts are more in the character and the placemaking, and but knowing that that's a concern, and obviously, and I've been talking since we've been here with developers and architects about construction costs here are just wild, and I was like, is that because you're far from a city? And it's like, no, it's pretty much everywhere around, and so not sure about that, but because if everything that's done has to be subsidized, it's tricky to have lots of people interested in anything more than a little bit here, a little bit there. And the other thing I want you guys to marinate on as we go is, I notice in Burlington, pretty much any new development that happens is clearly intended to be new development, right? No one's getting a new building confused with an old building architecturally, right? And so I don't know, I don't see here a bunch of buildings that are very sort of modern in their aesthetic, and so just you don't have to say what you
Brian,
think
are
it
you
should be.
talking about repurposing?
No, like a
existing
new building
buildings?
where they've like, there was something and maybe it was torn down and they built something new.
Okay.
Or even when they do an addition on a building, you
Okay.
know, it's, well, I think you guys are doing it on the
Yeah,
theater.
theater.
The theater, yeah, the theater has, it's much more contemporary, modern, the new part of it. But that's, and maybe I'm just forgetting, but that's one of the few times where I was like, oh, that's a different architectural sort of vibe than elsewhere. So something to consider. Typically, the renderings that we'll show and things we'll try to calibrate to have it be sort of understandable and recognizable as of this place, rather than something that's could be anywhere, just so you guys can respond to it better. But the zoning won't dictate architectural style necessarily, but we can have something in there like that. Says, for instance, that windows must be vertically proportioned, right? So that they're taller than they are wide. Whereas in, a lot of times you'll see in more modern architecture, there's sort of wide bands of windows or things. Some of those little details we'll get into. But, yes.
Sorry, I was late tonight, but what are the shaded areas there? And what is the
That's the study area.
the shaded area?
Yes, yes.
So a lot of that is wetlands.
Yep.
I wanted to ask one thing,
Yes.
and it's pretty much wetlands down there. So what is the plan to deal with the wetlands down
Yes, I'm guessing that you all are pro-wetlands, right?
Well, and we're pro, there's osprey, there's.
there? Well, it's
Yes.
floodplain. I'm just worried about you
Yeah.
building.
Yeah, I
Yes,
grew up building floodplain.
exactly. So we have another map. We have another map that actually has all the sort of environmental constraints overlaid on it. So, with as much land as is shown in that study area, we just say, well, we'll start by staying away from that, and then you go from there. So,
Okay. Does it take into effect the last couple of years of the excess flooding that we've gotten? Because they were widened on Seymour. I mean, I live on Seymour as well.
yes.
Apparently everyone from Seymour thinks that.
Yes. Welcome Seymour Street.
Yeah.
This is, I agree with this one on the denser housing in this area, since it's the proximity to town home. It's Detroit, definitely need it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering how you put it that, it's a lot of that shaded areas as well.
Right, and so for instance, when we were trumping around on our site visit, I was asking the homeowner, the landowner, I was like, so how high have you seen the water come here? And he sort of showed me where that line was overall, because he's lived here forever. And so we are taking all of that into consideration, and I don't know how kind of updated and tweaked the information is, but again, the thing that's great is, as a part of what we're doing, we simply make a note that says, stay out of the wetlands and the floodplains and all that. And so, our plan that we'll draw will just, like I said, be one of an infinite number of solutions. And so when people actually go to do development, hopefully inspired by this, plan and this process and the favorable zoning, they will have to do, delineation, surveys, site surveys and whatnot, and have all that dialed right in. So that's kind
So
of
that may have been at the beginning of your presentation before the engineer came. Can you just remind people one more time? This is not a development plan to actually.
Oh yeah, yes, that's right.
It's just an illustrative visioning process.
Yeah, exactly. It's
You got that part? Okay, I wasn't sure when you came
No,
in.
I didn't think you did.
Does the grant money support
Such that, I just want to
infrastructure?
continue with that train of thought though before you chime in again.
yeah. So the idea is it's just a inspiration and a vision, so you guys can sort of clarify. Here's what we like to see. We all like the idea of density around the station in this area, and we will then have zoning that will support it. And so you guys can say, like, we don't want 20 stories, but probably need more than 2, that kind of stuff. So that's what we'll do here.
Yeah, from the exercises though, like this particular one here, brought up infrastructure for the future of Middlebury. So, public sewer and water will have to support any development of housing. So my question was, so is the grant money comprehensive in that it helps the town with that infrastructure?
No.
No.
So this is specific to the master plan, right, Jen?
Okay,
Or
so this
what?
was
Yeah,
not,
This is for the town plan. like
Town
the
plan.
overall
that's for the
comprehensive
town plan, it's not for
Yes.
this discussion.
Yeah, they're related in that this is part of the town and this is thinking for the future and you know, there will be infrastructure and they're from an infrastructure, but
Okay.
the grant isn't to help
Okay,
with
that
infrastructure.
just wasn't clear to me.
Yes.
That is a separate
Yes.
piece.
Yeah, 6 o'clock started the TOD. Prior to 6
Okay.
o'clock was town plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yes. Hold on one second. I think I saw in the dark some hands over there. I'm gonna get so you, yes.
Yeah, hi, Bill Cunningham from Tri-Valley Transit, looking for your comment.
Yeah.
I would urge you to reach out to us. We'd love to tell you what our service can and can't do. We're very successful. We're 5 months into a pilot called Easy Trip, which is a Uber type door-to-door. It's not the dial,
Yeah.
it's something else. We've picked up a couple of routes from Blue Mountain Transit. They're not doing so well. So we are assessing needs in Middlebury. Easy Trip is perfectly suited for this type of development.
Awesome.
I will say that when you look at the train station, consider it as a multimodal resource.
Mm-hmm.
That hairpin turn, gotta go.
Yeah.
We can't get our buses in there. Green Mountain Trans Line still lands up at the college campus. It's probably a good place for them. They want it to be down at the train station, and we just can't. They have the new buses.
Mm-hmm.
Our vans can get in there. Easy Trip service would support that. And as traffic grows, we'll be able to support some of these later nights at the train station.
Great.
The limiting factor is that it's, I don't know where else you would site the train station, and it is there, and it's working very well.
Right.
It needs, that area needs to be improved.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay.
I have two questions. One, the outline of that shaded area seems to me somewhat arbitrary. If we're thinking about visioning and overlaying planning and development for a specific neighborhood within a certain proximity to the rail platform, then there are some sections that are so close to the rail platform, I don't understand why they weren't included in this shaded area. That's my
Yeah.
first question. And maybe the second question ties into the answer to the first question, but how much of the shaded area, I mean, I know the area pretty well, so I can almost answer the question, but how much of, what's the percentage of public lands or lands owned by the town of Middlebury versus private lands in that particular area?
I don't know off the top of my head. We have that information on our maps. And that's one of the things that we thought was great was that there is town-owned property there already. So even if the sort of other landowners aren't interested in anything, at least for some period of time, you could, the town can take initiative on its own to do so, which is exciting. But the boundary line is somewhat parcel based, and then it is based on, obviously this is one boundary there. We had initially stopped, I think, kind of, at the road here, but then CCRPC was interested in us incorporating some of this industrial area over there. But maybe more importantly, what do you think should be different?
I don't know, I mean, it's clear to me that it's parcel-based and dictated by the contour of the river, but it would seem to me that that if you're including private property and people who may be interested at some point, 10 years, 20 years down the road of being a part of some TOD development, why limit it to the parcel basis? So, so like for instance, where David lives, if you extended that line that cuts around the houses, right there, and just squared it off. It's this, I feel the same way about the, some of the other districts that are delineated in our town.
So
like
she's
the-
thinking of this as a
the
zoning
D-
district. I know
Yeah.
what that's for a living. She's a really talented realtor. So she thinks of things in terms of the zoning district. She and I are always having these conversations.
Yeah.
So this isn't at the zoning district phase yet. This would be your planning area to think about your vision, and then you'd have to decide where to apply the regulations that these guys are doing.
Okay.
Right,
That
so
makes sense.
for instance, like here, there are, you know, a handful of houses there, right? And they're right next to the station. And so you go like, okay, of course, we would include those and we'd take liberties and draw in that area. And then, you know, kind of as you get further away in these sort of tighter packed and smaller lots, you think, people may not be dying to see us stroll over the property, and so you carve those things out. And what we hope is that when we do something, people are like, oh, that's amazing. Can I be in? You know? And so really, besides the plan perspective, right, all you would ultimately do is extend the TOD zoning district on the on the map, you know, and then you could make it where you wanted it to be. So that's why we did it. It kind of carved those out. So, there's one in the back. I saw a question that handed up.
I was just going to ask, for the leisure property owners, in that area, are you planning to use them for their meetings and parcels?
Yeah. So we actually went today and toured. They're here with the property owner. We haven't talked to a couple that are over here yet. But again, you know, it's kind of like you say to somebody who,
You know, I can help fill in this question. This is Fred Dennington, former town planner. He thinks
Oh,
like
perfect.
I do, right? So I've been going nuts trying to contact people. I can't contact customers from Gary Baker. Gary Baker, we walked around with today.
Gary, that's her.
Yeah, or I can't contract those as a state because I don't know who has it. So if anyone has information on that, let me know. I'd like to let whoever inherited her property know that we're thinking about things. Louis Colasanti, I sent a letter that way, but no response yet. I think he's up in New Haven. I think he's in home health as well. Marble Works, I spoke to Oakley and Ryan Emilio, and I tried to see Oakley tonight. Oh, Joe, you're sitting right there. I'm like, no, he looks so familiar to me. We mostly correspond, not talking to each other. So Oakley's here, right? And these guys are looking to the Marble Works tomorrow. So maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. Realistically, so let's say you've lived there your whole life. When we come and say, what are your plans for your property? And they're like, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. Or like, how do you feel about TOD? Or, you know, and so I think that, or they say, my plans are to do nothing. I want nothing to do with this, right? And so I go, oh, okay, well, I guess we carved that parcel out now, and now there's this weird thing, and then you know, only to find that once the plan's done, then that land is on the market, you know, being listed, and so you know, we carved it out and didn't incorporate it. So, for instance, we are having a meeting with. Gary, thank you. Gary tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him specifically, hey, what do you think about, because like today when we were walking around, he was like, oh yeah, now imagine you would get here that way, and I was flabbergasted at how there didn't seem to be any sense of not wanting something to happen, or nostalgia, or sentimentality about it. It was like, oh yeah, something needs to happen, this is a place where that makes sense, and so it was very interesting so I can't wait to have that conversation. So yes, to Jen's point, as much as we can, it's great to talk, but you know, again, because it's just inspiration and vision, the specific desires of the property owner are, you know, not super pressing, you know, in the visioning process, from my perspective. Yes.
So you mentioned that if you had a recalcitrant, let's say, property owner, you would exclude them from the design? or
That was
from
my,
the-
that was my question, right? So if they say, I'm not interested, you go like, oh, now we carve it out, you
Why
know?
would you carve it out? Why
Exactly.
wouldn't you just like, right, like make sure that at some point in the future, this can participate? Right?
That's exactly what I
The
meant.
church in Manhattan.
That was my point.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah, so you would, in that case, you've asked them and now you've ignored them,
Yeah.
which doesn't seem awesome,
Yeah,
you know?
right, they can do whatever they want with their property.
Right, yes. And so, you know, what I always say is like, it's kind of like at the beginning here, I was like, hey, if this is your property, don't be afraid. This is free planning and you can get to see, if you want to do this, you can, and if you don't have to. You know, a lot of times people are like, oh wow, this is amazing. Now my property is actually worth a lot more than it was before because the zoning is increased and it's part of the transit-oriented development. And now my kids have an inheritance or whatever, you know, so there's lots of benefits to it. But I do always like to talk to people because they may have like some unique special knowledge about like, you know what used to be right here. And that's what, like, we were walking around and I could tell there was a remnant of something that was paved as we were walking. I was like, what did this used to be? It's like, oh, this is where the old barn used to be. And the horses that were, you know, we did the horses thing here, but then there was the contractor came in and rented it out and then it burned down and, you know, that kind of, right? And we were like, there weren't any horses in there, were there, you know? And so, for me, what I gain most often by talking to the owners is like the sense of history and things that you can incorporate into the placemaking. The fact that there used to be the horse track there, and that has something to do with the shape of the way that the road goes around and the weird hairpin turn and all that stuff. And so those things are particularly helpful for me, especially when we're doing like a real project, like we're working on a development project for a developer. We always want to tie that kind of stuff in. I love that. So.
Good.
Who else? That's it? We're ready for dinner, I guess, huh? Bed. We have to get out of here before all the restaurants close, right? All right. So this is great. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's participation and your thoughts and your great questions. We will continue working. Jen's door is always open. She's the boss, and she, you know, she's gonna be a great point of contact if y'all got, you know, some awesome idea that you want to make sure you get to us. Jen can take it, and she will make sure we have it. And just, you know, I really see this as a cool opportunity for something that could be transformational in a good way. We don't want to be transformational in a bad way, but we need you all to kind of stay involved as we go. So thank you for coming.